So I want to close our third and final lecture on visual processing by highlighting just how different our understanding of vision has become since Marr, and how different it is from our intuitive or introspective conscious perception of what it is we're doing when we see and how it is that we see. So recall when we talked about Marr, Marr had this view of vision as a single processing stream. It gathered image intensity rays at the back of the eye, and it processed those image intensity rays to create a single general purpose representation of the visual scene. That representation would serve as the representation for all the different functions that we used vision for. However, not that long after Marr had revolutionized vision, we see the emergence of a much, much more complicated and much, much less intuitive characterization of what actually occurs when we see. So we saw right at the back of the eye, right with those ganglions that have their axons shoot out of the eye to form the optic nerve, three processing streams emerge. The magnocellular processing stream, which processes primarily vision for motion perception and motion generation. We saw the parvocellular processing stream, which is limited almost exclusively just to that very small area of the fovea that processes fine pattern and object recognition information, as well as some color processing. These two streams go down the primary visual pathway to V1, and then they ultimately separate out into two different areas of our brain, the where-how in the dorsal stream and the what in the ventral stream, going down to the inferior temporal cortex. We also saw the coniocellular processing stream, a stream that really wasn't discovered until relatively recently. And it contributes to the color processing stream. It goes along into V1, where it then merges with the parvocellular processing stream, going down into the dorsal processing stream for the what processing. So two different general functional tasks. And that in and of itself is surprising and not very intuitive to us. We don't think of ourselves as processing that information differently, and Marr certainly didn't think of it that way. But then we discovered that that isn't the whole story even then. For one thing, that fine pattern object recognition color processing is really processing intensive. It takes up most of our visual processing. And in order to do that, it's limited to that very, very small area that we foveate on. And so as a result, in order to maximize the use of that resource, in order to optimize our vision for fine pattern, for objects, for color, for contrast, and so on, we develop a system for moving that resource around the visual field. And that was our saccadic processing system. That system identifies and assigns salience and priority to targets in the visual scene, and then it controls the movement of the eye to those targets so that it gets that information from all these different spots in the visual scene without having to have the brain the size of a bathtub or a refrigerator in order to process all that information. Now that benefit comes with a tremendous cost as well, because in order to move our eye around, to foveate and to use our attention for different parts of the visual scene, we have to have a mechanism that also creates a relatively stable sense of the visual scene. And so we saw that final processing stream that creates this perception of stability across these movements. It does through visual compression. It does so through suppression of blur. It does so through remapping the visual scene across those movements. And those 5 systems are always operating when we're seeing. This is far from the simple processing stream generating a single representation for general purposes that Mara envisioned. And it's also very far from our intuitive, our introspective, or our conscious awareness of vision or what it is we're doing when we're seeing. Our insight into vision, which is so natural and seemingly so open to our conscious awareness, is in fact really, really, really limited. And this is a theme that we'll see over and over and over again. Our understanding of how we actually function is in fact really, really limited and oftentimes utterly and completely false. So we see, once we start to investigate the actual mechanisms of vision, that vision is a much more complicated, much more diverse set of processing streams than we ever imagined it could be.